Welcome, everyone, and thank you for joining me and my very special guest. She is an award-winning dancer, choreographer, director, and teacher. You know her from such shows as Pippin, Over Here, Chicago, Sweet Charity, Dancin', and Fosse. Please say hello to Ann Reinking.
Hi, how are you?
Hi, Ann. First of all, where are you and how are you?
Well, I am in Arizona, in Phoenix, Arizona. So it's very, very hot outside. So I'm glad to be inside, and I'm fine. Thank you.
So, how have you been getting through? This is our 138th day of quarantine. I mean, sometimes it seems like yesterday, sometimes it seems like, a year ago. How are you and your husband and your family and your son dealing and handling as we progress through this shutdown?
I would say, pretty well. However, there are days where we're all a bit stir crazy. Yeah. Sometimes I get a little depressed because there's such lack of activity that you don't realize how much you do in a day until you can't do that anymore. So it was real good for the first 2 weeks. I was getting lost at rest, but I'm getting restless now.
Yeah. You were one of the stars, one of the many stars that have gotten involved with and joined the Pack podcast, the new spoken word series of short plays by Eugene Pack. How did you get involved with the podcast?
Well, he just called. I think he knew a friend of mine, a friend of a friend, and he had gotten my email, and it sounded like fun, and it's for a good cause. This is a tough time, and there are too many people, way too many people, literally suffering and worrying about things that no one should ever worry about, like where's my rent money, how much for food, what doctor do I go to if I don't feel well, all sorts of things, and especially for dancers, how do I stay in shape, because you can't go to class. So I wanted to do something, and I must say that I get nervous before every Zoom or podcast or anything, but while I'm doing it, I really enjoy it. I'm grateful for the ability to just do something, that's constructive, so, and I'm not eating.
Yeah. This play is called BroadwayWorld. Of course, we're BroadwayWorld. When you read the play, what went through your mind? Because it takes place on a red carpet, doesn't it?
Yeah. Well, I love my part. I can't remember her name right now, but she was a very silly, over the top sort of woman who had a certain splash on Broadway, but it never really stayed. But she's sort of in that over the top overtures about expression, and she cracked me up. So I thought, well, this would be fun to do.
Yeah. I'm fascinated how the virtual world works now, because we're all doing this whole thing, like I said, StreamYarding or Zooming. When you recorded this, you were all together on the same screens or something, weren't you, in different parts of the country?
Yeah, it was just like doing a for real live radio session, where there's maybe one microphone and everybody's going in and out, and trying not to, you want to pick up on your cues, but you don't want to sort of top it. The rhythm's different. So it was fun. It was fun to kind of relearn something that I had never actually really had the privilege of doing, so it was fun.
Yeah. What I love about his podcast is that it benefits the Actors Fund and Feeding America. And I'm sure that's a big reason why you decided to do this. Tell me what those organizations or what this benefiting them means to you, Ann.
Oh, it means everything to me. First of all, when the first time I was ever introduced to the Actors Fund was, of course, the Actors Fund benefits. And I saw 1776 for the first time and for free, so that I could see another show while I was doing a show. I was so moved by it and so just touched, because here I was, an actor that wasn't making a lot of money, but at least doing what I loved and wanted to on Broadway. And I could see another Broadway show that had, a major award winner and such a unique take on the signing of the independence, the Declaration of Independence, which of all topics doesn't seem to be a musical that you would sing and dance to. But there are no rules to theater, and indeed, you certainly could sing and dance to signing the Declaration of Independence. There's no story that is not tellable or worthy of being told. And I learned that all at that one point. So I became very proud of the Actors Fund that they did so much for us and to help us to get the education we needed, the inspiration we needed. Just everything was. You don't realize how much you have to know until you start trying to know. And I did come to New York as a dancer with some knowledge and some expertise. But if it wasn't for the Actors Fund, I wouldn't have been able to have done as many things as I could have done without the availability of the Actors Fund. It's crucial. It also helps actors who are no longer acting, or performers who are no longer performing, that need help and need a place to go if they're ill or if they're just at the end of their life. So it's a very important organization that I'm very proud of. And of course, Feed America says it all, doesn't it? So it's a good thing to do these things, especially in such an unprecedented, frightening time. You know, you try to stay brave. And I think that's essential with the Actors Fund, is to keep your courage up and to stay encouraged. So both of them are so worthwhile. I think a lot of people don't understand the immense goodness that the Actors Fund does and how far-reaching it is. So maybe on a situation like this, we start to know, and will help us to help ourselves one more time.
Beautiful. Well, the PAC podcast, they put new plays up every Thursday. Yours will be up this Thursday, which is called BroadwayWorld. And of course, they benefit the Actors Fund and Feeding America. And just go to the pacpodcast.org to watch. You know, the last time I saw you in the flesh was the Chita Awards, when you and Ben Vereen co-hosted that incredible night. And what did that night mean to you?
Oh, well, first of all, anything for Chita is, you know, a number one. And I had just so enjoyed that evening. And Ben and I, in rehearsal the day before, we couldn't see because neither of us can see anything without our glasses on. I'm hard of hearing now, and Ben and I, neither one of us can move very well, but somehow we realized that we had to address this as if it was, you know, like any other show. And we really worked hard. We rehearsed. We thought a lot about it. And it was such a friendly circumstance anyway. It made the ability to have fun in front of everybody totally doable. And I love Ben. He just cracks me up. Actually, when we finished our rehearsal the day before the actual award, Ben dropped his script and pages went all over the sidewalk. Neither one of us could stoop down low enough to pick up a piece of paper. The two of us were like two pieces of Jell-O holding each other up. And we started laughing so hard because finally his manager had to get out of the car and help us pick up these pages. And I think we sort of broke the ice and we said, you know what, we better be good for Chita tomorrow. So we rehearsed and rehearsed, and I must say it paid off because it was so much fun.
That was such a remarkable night. I remember each time you two walked on, you were hilarious. And I know there was an inside joke going on backstage. Now I know, like you said, I can't see, I can't hear. Do we bring the right script with us?
I can't get on my knees anymore. So we had to represent the old folk.
Well, I'll tell you, you did a beautiful job. That is one of my favorite award shows, and that night was so magical, just so you know that.
Oh, great. Thank you so much.
You know, I want to go back to the beginning. Growing up in Seattle, where did your love for dance begin?
In 6th grade at Enetai Elementary School, And Mrs. James, as an assignment, my teacher said that we had to do a talent show, and everybody had to do it. So you can either sing or recite a poem or whatever. And so I went and I wrote a little sketch for myself called Our Big World, and how many ways you could use a scarf. And it went all right. But what really was spectacular was Carla Sealander, who was a very precocious dancer and also getting scholarships at age 10 and 11 and 12. So she did the Sugar Plum Fairy variation from the Nutcracker. She brought her record player, plugged it in, put the record on, and she's got the crown and the pink tutu and the pink tights and the pink point shoes. She just looked so beautiful, and she put the needle on the record, and she did the entire variation. And I had never seen really good dancing like that. That's the first time I saw ballet done really well, and I fell in love. Absolutely fell in love. I had no other wish for my 11th birthday. That was it. So I sort of forced my parents' hands, and I said, you got to give me a ballet lesson. So I got one a week for a while. And they also gave me a ballet bar in my bedroom so that I could practice. So that's where it all started. It was an assignment.
That's a great 11th birthday. I know you asked for one present. You got ballet lessons and you got a ballet bar in your room.
Yeah, that was to boot.
That's great. You began with the San Francisco Ballet. Is that true?
I was a scholarship student with the Ford Foundation scholarship, and 3 consecutive summers, 2 months every summer, with a total immersion program. And I got to watch the company. I would, be an usher in the night and then a dancer in the day, or a student. I would watch company class at 10 o'clock and then start my 2-3 classes for the day. And it was a dream come true. And I had that for 3 summers. And then I had a Joffrey scholarship for the last summer before I went to New York City.
So what got you to New York? Was it Joffrey?
Joffrey recommended to me. He actually guided me in a very, very crucial time. He said, Anne, if you want to dance ballet, you can. You can have a career. He said, because he had heard me sing, and I was always kind of cut up in class, and that he somehow enjoyed me. So he said, you have a great personality. You're a good singer, and you pick up things pretty well. And he said, I think you would just have a lot more fun if you went on Broadway. And he said, I'm not telling you that to try and ease the fact that you can never dance ballet. He said, that's not what I'm saying. He said, I just think, and he loved Broadway, and he said, I just think you'd be happier and probably more successful. And it was at a time where I really needed to have somebody, especially of that ilk, basically guide me, because my devotion was split in amateur plays and musicals, or in amateur ballet, classical ballet. And I must say it helped me a lot, because it stopped me from being a bunhead and a bit of a dance snob. So, I was more eclectic, and therefore my life was happier. If we're lucky, we have a long life. So we're going to have to like quite a few things in order to get through this life. And it can't be just one thing. So, and he was very eclectic himself, as you know, with his company and his whole approach. He gave Twyla Tharp her big break, and brought ballets from the 30s by Kurt Yost back into everyone's knowledge and repertoire. He really was a remarkable, patron, and one of the great Diaghilevs of our time. And he just really was a help to many, many people. And he was an amazing help to me. So I saved up my money. I had $500 and a round trip plane ticket. And that's how it started.
So was your first professional job that tour of Fiddler on the Roof?
Actually, I went to Radio City Music Hall first. At that time, they still had a ballet company, and that's where I learned to buy a trade paper, Backstage or Showbiz or Variety,
Yeah.
to know when the auditions are. And one of my friends in the dressing room at Radio City was going to what they call a cattle call, or an open non-equity audition, and it was 500 people, and I just got it. I was there all day, and fortunately, it was on my day off or a week off. That you work for 4 weeks straight through, and then they gave you a week off. So fortunately, it was even on my week off, so that I could take the time to spend all day auditioning, and I had a wonderful time. It was great. So that's my second job, and that's how I got my equity card, which, as you know, is very important.
Oh, yeah. So was that the Fiddler Tour that went through Arizona? And is that where you first fell in love with where you live today?
That's exactly true. I was 18 and I visited Phoenix, and old Scottsdale was just plain Scottsdale. So all of this sprawl that's going on now wasn't there. But it just, you know how it is, sometimes things just strike an inner chord in you. And I just said to myself, sometime I'm going to come back here. It had a lot of old bones, hopefully not my family's, but
I think that's great, though, to like be on a tour and say, wow, I'm fascinated by this beautiful place. And you've been to so many places, and now you live in this beautiful place in Arizona. That's a great story.
Oh, thank you. Thanks. I know it doesn't happen too often, but I'm very, very glad that it did. My husband is a sports writer, or was. We're both retired or semi-retired. And he was reporting on the golf course, Troon, which is at the Boulders. And it's in the middle of summer. If you're reporting, you always are on off season. So, and he loved it. And he said, I just love it here. And I went, really? And I said, well, I've always had this dream about going to Phoenix when I retire or semi-retire. And he said, I could do this. So here we are.
That's beautiful.
It's meant to be.
That's gorgeous. Many people were supposed to make their Broadway debuts this spring, and then the pandemic hit. And I hope that they all get to make it when the theater and Broadway and the New York theater scene comes back bigger and better than ever. But, Broadway debuts are magical. They only happen once. Yours was in Cabaret on Broadway. Do you remember your Broadway debut? How magical was that night for you, Anne?
Oh, it was great. And I was working with the Hell Prince office. They're very loyal. And so when there was an opening, they called me because the closing notice was already up on the bulletin board, and it kept going down every Thursday. But I was rehearsing and learning the show it just kept going up and then coming down and going up and coming down. But I did 2 months on Broadway, and that led to the dance captain of Cabaret, whose name is Bonnie Walker. She liked me, and she was captain for Coco with Katharine Hepburn and choreographed by Michael Bennett. And she did me the favor of pointing me out. She said, that's all I can do. Then you're on your own, but you won't get lost in the crowd. And that was incredibly fortunate. And then to have Fiddler, Cabaret, and Coco be your first 3 musicals is a major education, because Coco was Alan Lerner and Andre Previn, and of course, Katharine Hepburn. So what I learned in a few months via these remarkable masters of their craft was invaluable. And I liked everybody. You hear all these scary stories about, this person and that person. I very seldom have I ever met anybody in theater that acts a lot the way the stereotypical theatrical person, that's very sort of over the top and creates a lot of drama and trouble. They're just hardworking, good folk.
So, it's amazing when you mentioned those first 3 jobs that you did, I mean, you learned from the very best, like you said, Jerome Robbins, Michael Bennett, you know, Ron Field.
And that was Candor and Ebb. My first time was Candor and Ebb, and it would just and Ron Field's choreography and the smartness of the show. Yeah, no, I was fortunate. I was fortunate that my 6th grade teacher said we're going to do a talent show. I don't know why, but she did, and I'm glad. And then when I did, you know, have to make a decision, then a brilliant man like Robert Joffrey said, "Why don't you go in this direction?" And I did, and then my first 3 musicals were so significant. So I was very, very, very lucky. Yeah. It takes talent to have luck too.
I'm glad you gave a big shout out to Bonnie Walker, because I always say dance captains or associates are the unsung heroes of shows. They keep them fresh. They have their eye out for talent when they'll go to a director or choreographer and say, look at her or look at him. And then like, wow. So, and I saw a big production of Cabaret that she had done on Long Island. So I'm a huge fan of Bonnie Walker. So thank you for giving a big shout out to her, Anne.
Me too. I love her. I heard this. I think it's lore, but maybe not, because you know Bonnie, so do I. But Bonnie wrote everything out longhand on, you know, the big yellow legal pads, and a show usually with all the notes that you did, you know, even during the run. And she'd put them all in shopping bags, all these legal pads, and then she'd mark the shopping bag as to which show it was. So she had to teach it again. She would pull out the shopping bag or bags. Anyway, because she was so good, everybody wanted her. And this is the lore, the legend, is that she had so many shopping bags, it didn't fit in her own apartment. So she got a studio apartment so she could put her shopping bags there. And God forbid if there was a fire. Can you imagine half of all the knowledge, you know? I hope she gave her notes to the, you know, Performing Arts, Library of Performing Arts in Lincoln Center, because I mean, it was valuable information. Occasionally I'd kind of peer over her shoulder to see what she's writing, and it was good. It was very clear, very good as to what to do. And I just, isn't that a dancer for you? It's just, you know, put in a shopping bag and put in a closet, you know where it is. So I don't know if she got a studio, but I loved her. She was really good at what she did. Very clear, very, you know, pristine, and she liked good, clean dancing, and someone who worked hard. And because that's the way she was. She's a beautiful woman.
Yeah, I love that story. I got to find out what happened. I'll find out what happened to those shopping bags.
That's fun. That's true.
Yeah. Well, you know, and then you met the legendary Bob Fosse, for whom you became his protege and muse. And did you meet at the Pippin audition?
Yes. Yeah. It was such a good audition. I had never been to an audition like that, because Bob actually got up on the stage and started dancing with us. And once the ballet combination was done, then he got up on stage, because so there were still many of us, but he started, you know, working with us side by side, and he would say, you know, why don't you try this step? It says the same thing, but I think it's going to look better on you. Let's give that a shot. And he really was testing, you know, unbeknownst to me, you know, how well you take notes, how well you work, how well you follow along, how well you contribute, because with one of the combinations, our steps in isolation, that's where you move one, you know, piece of your body at that time, they were set. But we were also supposed to pantomime a balloon that we put up into the air and then caught, and, you know, and then switched hand to hand. And, you know, how were we going to do that with this very specific dancing? And he would help us along with that, you know, with the improv of the balloon. You know, do you want to take your hat off and catch the balloon with your hat? How do you want to do? So he sprung up enough ideas that I just started concentrating. We all did. And it became very creative and a lot of fun. And he had a way of taking the fear out of auditioning. which is a big, because auditioning is almost another craft. You know, you have 20 minutes to show somebody everything you own, and hopefully then some, and that they should hire you. So when he made it more like actual working, I did a lot better than I normally do auditioning. And I was grateful for that. And I was having so much fun. And I got called back, and as I was taking the bus home, I said, gee, even if I don't get this show, this has been the best day I've ever had. It was just wonderful. And the singing audition was the same. Because he wanted the dancers to handle the singing. So that was a bit touch and go. It was one of the first times that actually was allowed. Usually you had your singing ensemble and then your dancing ensemble and your principals. But Bob wanted to keep this very commedia dell'arte, very small jewel box. So we were also supposed to handle all the minor parts and the entire singing, the backup. And so he really worked with us on that to see if we had what it takes, or that he could mold it enough so that it would sound good. And you know, that was a great thing as well, because by the time I got the audition, by the time I got the job, I was comfortable with him. I felt I knew him a little bit and knew what he wanted. There was so much information and education going back and forth between the creator and the ensemble that he broke down all walls, all barriers. So by the time we had our first day of rehearsals, I oddly enough knew what to do. I knew him well enough that it was comfortable. And that's a great privilege and wonderful luck, to be comfortable on your first day of a show. And this, and a show that I really, really wanted. I loved Mr. Fosse's work. I loved his work. And I really had a lot of hope that it would work out, and it did. And I just never have had that kind of experience before in my life. I have later on, but not before that, where the ensemble was the other star. You know, they were equally as important as the principal. And I felt that value helped everybody grow. And of course, go ahead. I'm sorry.
Did he ever tell you, maybe later in life, why he chose you that day? Did you ever ask him for Pippin?
The one thing he offered is that he said, when I started working with you, Anne, he said you could do adagio, you could do fast, quick steps, you could do big jumps, you know, the big stuff, and that you were game. I was game, is what he said. You were just absolutely game for, you know, going for it, and not having any questions. And he said you leave a lot to faith sometimes, because I'm not the best person in rehearsal, but when I finally get it, then it's good. But that whole development part, you know, is a little dicey. He said, you require a lot of faith, he said, but you also create a tremendous amount of trust as you're working, as I worked with you. So that was a real compliment, because trust is so key to any form of creativity. You have to have faith, you have to have trust, and never judge. If you decide to take the job, then you shouldn't judge. It's your job to make it as good looking as you can, so that the choreographer can see, is it because it's not danced well, or is it because it needs more work? What does it need? And that's your job. And it was so clear as to what to do as a performer. To have, well, when you think about it, there's Jerome Robbins, Michael Bennett, Ron Lewis, Hal Prince, Fred Ebb and Kendra Nebb, then Alan Lerner and Michael Bennett, and then Bob Fosse and Stephen Schwartz. That's a lucky experience, because by the time I got to do a principal role, I really was able. I was right. I had had enough education, enough experience. So, um, sometimes, if I get down and think, oh, gee, why didn't I get this? Or I could have done that. I just need to look at my resume to see how lucky I have been. And hopefully I paid all these wonderful people back, with hard work. But when I look at it, I know that I have had great fortune. So, and
Yeah.
maybe that's why I still love it.
Totally. But then you went on to the Andrew Stitches musical Over Here, which remains one of my favorite musicals. I adored that at the Schubert. You got to work with the great choreographer Patricia Birch, and of course, she created that incredible show-stopping number, Charlie's Place, for you and John Mineo. I mean, what was it like working on that number and working with Pat?
Oh, Pat was the best. It was Pat who gave me my first principal role. She saw me in Pippin, and because Bob utilized the ensemble so well, she wanted me, and she asked me to come in. I had to come in for 3 consecutive days. They were almost going to have to pay me, because they were really. But when I walked, this is, when you walk on a stage and they're out in the audience in the black, darkness. And she stood up and said, "That's her." And she does. She wanted me come heck or high water. And she's so easy to be with. And her sense of, she said, you have to love chaos and hard work. And there was one other motto she had, but you have to love chaos, which is true. There's a time where you just have to mold something out of, all this energy that's not put together yet. And every choreographer works differently. And Pat is very organic, which is, I think, one of the reasons why people who are not dancers specifically do so well under her guidance. Like the brilliant scene in Big, where they're at Schwartz, and it's Tom Hanks and I can't remember the other actor. He's Jack Warden. That's it. You sure? Anyway, somebody good like that, on the piano, the big piano that's on the floor, and the kids would step on it and it lights up and you try and make a melody, and they played chopsticks. And I said to myself, this is real charm. And once again, it was Patty. So to tell you, that's how relaxed you can get. So we just experimented every way possible to do a jitterbug, and each take on it, there was a couple of lifts or steps to take and put over on the side, because we're going to use those 2 steps eventually. And I'd never worked like that, to where you just sort of like, well, I was a part of it all with Bob, but you're really a part of it all with Patty. And it's sort of like, let's just do something fun, and let's see what happens. And out of all those different sessions came this really remarkable jitterbug and Johnny and I were the 2 really trained dancers, and everybody else moved well.
Yeah.
And could do anything, because they were young and wanted to do anything. And I met, Patty has a great eye. I met John Travolta, Mary Lou Henner, John Driver. There was another. Janie Sell. Some wonderful people that came out of Over Here. And I got to meet the Andrews sisters. And I got to take my dad out to dinner with Maxine Andrews. I thought my father was going to faint.
Yeah.
Because I forget that these were the rock stars of that era. And my dad just was, and they talked about the war and this and that. And I knew the Andrews sisters because my dad had all their records. So it was a really great time. It was fun.
And Patty that show. Yeah, and then they did their little nightclub act at the end. The curtain would come down, and the curtain would go up, and the Andrews sisters would do 3 or 4 of their big numbers, and we were like, "Oh my gosh, this is incredible!" It's an extra show.
It was a real pleasure, and I mean, these 2 women, the whole part of the theme of the show is that they're looking for a third singer, which turns out to be Janie Sell. And but their sound is so interesting. They do their own harmonies, and they represented such a key time in basically in our survival as Americans and survival of democracy. So the drama that is inherent in that, no matter what comedic value you give to it, it's still talking about a very serious time in American history and in the world's history, and it gets to you every night, especially when they sang their hits. So I really understood an era.
A lot of fabulous memories. You know, you garnered your first Tony nomination in Good Time Charlie, one of my favorite musicals that played the Palace. It was you as Joan of Arc opposite Joel Grey. Wonderful musical. It must have meant a lot to you moving from a dancer. I mean, I know you had, you played Maggie in Over Here, but to have really been given a leading role in that show, what did that mean to you, Anne?
Just everything. It really did. The director, Peter Hunt, I really got along with very well. Everything was crystal clear as to who I was. We collaborated on, okay, there are so many different renditions of Joan of Arc.
Yeah.
What do I want to bring to it as a character, as myself invested in this character? And then Dennis Nahat, the choreographer from American Ballet Theater, he choreographed this amazing war ballet for me, where I'm in armor. So there were some significant drawbacks for dancing because I'm in armor, but it worked and it was excellent. And then Ona White did all the other choreography, which I thought was spectacular as well. So to have a part as meaty as Joan of Arc with opposite, there's just something about Joel and I. We always make a good couple. He's either my husband in Amos or my liege and my king in Good Time Charlie. And it was originally called Joan and Charlie, and it's about their relationship and how she helped him to not be a puppet and to be a true king and to win this war that was crucial. So that was one of my favorite parts. Everybody wants to play a saint, and I got to.
Yeah, you then stepped into the role of Cassie in Michael Bennett's A Chorus Line, and A Chorus Line just celebrated their 45th anniversary. What did your time in that show mean to you, Anne? Because you had worked with Michael, of course, before then, and Bob Avian.
Well, I love Michael and Bob. First of all, I love the show. And I went in 2 months after it had opened on Broadway because most of the New York company went to LA and San Francisco. So when the curtain went up for us, it was as if we were the original company. I mean, it was the screaming and the yelling and the just sheer love was all there. It was exciting. Michael was wonderful. He changed choreography for me because I dance differently than Donna, and so good choreographers, they love to tailor. It's their job to make you look good, and so Michael was very generous in giving me more jumps and more extensions. Whereas, let me tell you this, Donna was the one who first started to teach me the number for Cassie, and it's kind of a sort of a fake, sort of a glissade with a susu. This means nothing to you, but everything for a dancer. And then all of a sudden, this big layout with a big head snap. When she did it, my knees buckled. And I started to get a little tearful because I'm saying to myself, I don't think I'm going to be able to do this, this kind of thing. She was so strong and so good. And so, Michael said, not to worry, we're going to do things that are good for you, that say the same things. He said, we're just going to find out what looks good on you. and then we'll take it from there. And that was a real privilege. But Donna is one of the nicest human beings in the world, along with Gwen and Chita. These women are so beautiful and generous, and I got to work with every one of them. And Donna couldn't have been nicer. And of course, Donna's a soprano, and I'm basically a tenor. So all that Michael wanted to know was, could Music in the Mirror sound okay in an alto voice? And it did. So I got to be Cassie, and my dreams came true. That's when I said to myself, when your dreams come true, you sweat more. Yeah. The responsibility is huge, and all the work is very, very hard work, and you have to be very dedicated. I love that part. She was such a real. The character was such a real dancer, wasn't she? She was just classic dancer, thinking, I don't care if I was a principal, I still want to dance. Can you possibly understand that? I love the line, I want to dance. Do you want me to say it again? Once you understand, do you want me to say it again? And that line always got to me, because sometimes we express ourselves with our bodies, and sometimes verbal explanation that comes later in our life. And I love that line. I don't know any other way to say it. Do you want me to say it again? And it's such a dancer line, but with all the passion. And if you're any good at subtext, it comes out whether you say it or not. So I loved it. Yeah.
Well, I was thrilled. I got to see you in that. I had bought another pair of tickets, and it was like you and Don Korea. I was like, oh my gosh, look at this new cast that's in a chorus line. All my favorites. You then replaced Gwen Verdon, your dear friend, as Roxy Hart in Candor and Ebbs, Chicago on Broadway. You have to talk about Gwen Verdon, first of all, of her teaching you the ins and outs of Roxy, because I'm sure she put you into the show with Bob. Did she?
Yes, she did. Bob made some changes for me, which Gwen looked at Bob and she says, can I do that until my last show? And Bob said, well, sure. And so we're all, and one time she came up to me and said, is it an extension? Which one? Left leg, right leg? I said, it's your right leg. Oh, good. That's my good leg. And, so we were kind of, forming this new Roxy, during the monologue, new steps that she loved and she wanted to do, and steps that I loved that I was always dying to do, like the Joe Frisco and all of these wonderful, wonderful X's and O's, brilliant, eccentric steps that came out of vaudeville, that when Gwen danced them and Chita, they looked quirky but graceful at the same time. They had a lot of qualities. So I was dying to do that language. And then to have Gwen Gwen was really a champion, my champion. She liked me a lot, and she helped me a lot, and she was also my boss, because Gwen took care of all of Bob's shows. So she has been my boss for umpteen jillion years, and then she allowed me to do cabaret using the style of Bob Fosse, and the very last number, which is Hot Honey Rag. It says in small print right by the number, although it says in the style of Bob Fosse in big print, so that's good. Original choreography by Bob Fosse. And I asked her, could I do the original? And she said, which original? Mine, yours, Lenora's, Juliet's, and I said, oh, you're right. I said, the only one I can remember is mine. She said, oh, sure. So I think she appreciated that I insisted that it be, they didn't want to have staged by Ann Reinking, so it was choreographed by Ann Reinking. So then I insisted in the style of Bob Fosse, because Encore Series, their mission statement is to try and recreate in the spirit of the original creators. And so when we went on Broadway, I said, look, if you like the show and think it's going to work, you got to do it this way. And they were good. The directors were very good about it. But I said it has to be in the style of Bob Fosse. So when I got the Tony, I thank Bob right then and there, because it really was his Tony. So, but I think Gwen appreciated my honesty, and she saw that I really understood Bob very well throughout the years. She's the one who got me the job to direct Fosse. So she's been an amazing champion. And I remember when, and teacher, I remember we're standing on 45th Street, and at the Schubert is, Chicago. Then right next to it at the Broadhurst was Fosse. And I said, we could do the next theater down. Let's do Fosse 2. And then it'll be Fosse, Fosse, Fosse. And we're laughing, And we were actually, before she died, we actually did have some, more or less serious conversations about doing a Fosse 2, because the stuff he did so much, and it was so rich, and it was all good. I mean, the worst of him was really good, Yeah. So his really good stuff was great. So it was and Gwen has a photographic memory, literally, and she doesn't throw anything away. So she has all these pictures. She's got the costume she wore. She's got all these notes. She's got the books that he referred to. She had all of the history of his work organized, and it was all up here as well. So there's a real reason why he respected her so much, and they were best friends. I think anybody who would be jealous of that relationship isn't thinking right, because it's so genuine, and they both helped each other so much. And they were each other's champion. And talk about privilege to see how they work and what they have done for each other, both as, people and their integrity, but also their genius. They really were brilliant. And I got to be a part of that. So, yeah, that's kind of nerve-wracking, isn't it? First, you take over for Donna McKechnie, that's nerve-wracking. And then you take over Gwen Verdon, and that's nerve-wracking. But both those women had a way of just being a great gal, and one calmed down quickly and realized that these people are exceptional and more than generous. Very true people.
When you were talking about Chicago, you called it cabaret, but I know you meant that when you did it.
I meant Chicago.
It's all good, but it's all camera and ebb. It's a combination of everything.
Yeah, it's all good stuff.
Did you ever think? I mean, Chicago. I loved Chicago the first time around. Saw it like 4 times with Gwen, Chita, and Jerry. Saw Liza. Yeah. I saw you and Lenora. I mean, I loved that musical. It must mean so much to you that first you started this out going to encores, not even dreaming that it might even go to Broadway. It was just getting up at encores. And now it's the longest running American musical in the history of Broadway. How proud is that?
Well, it's wonderful. The only thing I regret is I wish Bob could have seen how good his work was, and that it's classic work. It may come from a certain era, but it will never be dated. And how smart Fosse, Kander, and Ebb were. I'm not even sure if Fred Ebb and John Kander knew how good it was when it was the original. But when they saw the encores, which was basically a script, bare bones set, everybody wears black, that's it. And so you really see the writing, the choreography, the talent, the performance skills, the brilliant ensemble, and see how good it was, and that it was a musical vaudeville. That was their first definition of it. A lot of times people ask me, did you know when it was originally done how good it was? And not to sound conceited, but the answer is yes, I did. So when we had the opportunity for encores, and Walter Bobby was good enough to ask me, I said, this is a brilliant show. Walter agreed. I said, I think we've got it. And also the moment I saw that set with the band on stage in the jury box shape, I went, we're in. I had great confidence, and it was just so much fun. And who knew? Yeah, it's true. I didn't realize a 4-day engagement or gig was going to turn into 23, 24 years, but I'm very happy, very, very happy that it did. It's been a reward.
Spectacular. You know, I want to back up to Dancing because you received your second Tony nomination. Dancing remains one of the best nights I've ever spent. I would say definitely top 10, if not top 5, I've ever spent in the theater. So groundbreaking, Fosse. I mean, no book. I mean, Bob always took risks. I mean, take me back to when you and Bob were together. How did Dancing come about?
Okay. Well, we were watching, this is one of the many stories because it's a multitude of stories, but we were watching this TV movie about Custer, you know, The Last Stand, and the madness / brilliance of this person. And they start to show a bit of his madness and how much he loved parading. And it was all done to revolutionary tunes, fife and drum, all of that kind of stuff. Or When Johnny Comes Marching Home, and all these beautiful songs that the military marched to and paraded to. And Bob said, "What a great idea! You should just do this big 20-minute number, call it." And at that point, he called it Yankee Doodle Dandy, and then he switched it to Yankee Doodle Disco because we did disco dancing to Yankee Doodle Dandy. And he just got in a studio with Kathy Dobie and Chris Chadman and myself. And we started working on these revolutionary, you know, fife and drum songs from that sprung out of war and tried to inspire people to march into war. And that was one of them. And then another one was, this number got caught. It was, I can't remember what the title of the number one, but it was, Bob had a thing about, he said his penthouse or his Playboy was really Vogue or Bazaar because the women were so beautiful. It was stimulating enough. You didn't need to go beyond, you know, the fashion. And that, what would happen if you were a man who had never seen TV or even heard radio, came out of nowhere, and you were in the middle of New York City? So, and it didn't make it, but he started to explore that too. And then it just went on and on from there. This theme, that theme. Yeah. Oh, he heard Hot August Night in the summer. So, and he wanted, there was Neil Diamond, and he said, this could be a great opening number, and it was. So he's just started building, and one day it happened.
Well, it is so groundbreaking and brilliant. When you do Fosse 2, take the numbers that didn't make it into Dancing, which you say were probably showstoppers, you know, and add it into that. I mean, I just love, and the dancers, I mean, the entire ensemble of dancers that was in that show. Now, behind me is a picture of you. Is it called a layback? What is that?
Yeah. It's the layback. Well, you kick as high as you can, and you try and get your head back as far as you can. And our layout or layback, both work. You know, that was the other idea. He loved it's called The Famous Night, 1936 or 38, the famous Carnegie Hall performance of Sing, 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 Benny Goodman, Harry James, and those improvs were all genuine improvs. And it was, I mean, I wasn't a big swing band fan until I heard that. And then also when I started dancing to it, swing is so much fun to dance to. I loved it. And of course I did a jitterbug, and I loved that. So by the time we started working out Sing, 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 I was in love with that kind of musicianship and swing music, and how much it really turned on the world, and the dancing changed. So That was another one where all of a sudden you're realizing, boy, we've got some meat here. And then another one was just percussion. Bob had this big trunk with gloves and tambourines and claves and, sandpaper and all this sort of stuff that makes noise, triangle, tune. And he said, what would we do if there was no music and we just did it to percussion? And so that was the start of percussion, 1, 2, 3, and 4. And they just kept growing. But something would attract him, and it was always music. A lot of people don't know that a lot of the choreography to Pippin was originally done in the studio to Harry Nilsson's album Nilsson Schmilsson. Like the Charles Manson Trio was done and created on Come On Baby, Let the Good Times Roll. And then Stephen brilliantly realigned it to Glory, but with that style, Stephen Schwartz. So it's interesting. The music has to inspire. Then he listens to it forever and ever and ever. And then ideas start popping up. And then we go into the studio. So it's a real practical science to creativity. You do what you know, you do what inspires you, and then you hope something blossoms out of that. But you have to start from education and what you know. There's no other way. There you go.
One of my all-time dancing was one of my all-time favorite shows. Like so out of the box with Bob Fosse and all of you was absolutely brilliant. Charity, you got to step into the iconic role of Charity, Hope Valentine, and Sweet Charity. Again, I'm sure Gwen taught you as she taught all the charities.
Yes, she did.
I know it's all the ins and outs, especially what happens backstage. Tell me what it's like working with Gwen and Bob all over again on Charity.
Well, it was being back to perfection again, but I have to also note that there was a period in my life where every woman who really was a great singer, dancer, and actress, I had the privilege of taking over for them. And Debbie Allen, who had been nominated for Charity, she was brilliant. So I was saying to myself, I've been so lucky because I study them, and every great dancer, something so much to offer. And in theater and in ballet in particular, the ballerina always passes on what they know. It's a hands-on craft. You can't really learn the soul and the pathos of it if you just see a video. So it has to be taught by someone who is in the know, and with that generosity that I think it's more inherent in dancers to pass on what you know rather than acting or singing. But it's such a physical craft, that an art form, that you just really need to see the body and hear the thinking. This is what I thought here. It may help you. I think dancers tend to be more generous because you do have to pass it on. And so the originals teaching it to me, wow, Debbie Allen is still on stage. So I'm watching Debbie and I'm watching Gwen and I'm being taught, and then Bob comes in the afternoon, and then it's changed to me, a little bit of changes here and there. And it's like going to Harvard every day or Princeton. It just depends on which great dancer I had the privilege of following, because that's how I got to be. You can't get good any other way. You have to, or at least I can't. And if I hadn't had those remarkable examples, I would like to say I would still be good, but I wouldn't be the dancer I am, or was. So it's a privilege to have that information passed on. Yeah, Gwen said, we have to have a Hall's mentholatum tab right on this wing. You see where there's the little wood that holds up the fly there? He said, you put your, you need water and one of those tabs. And and stuff like that. And she said, okay, what you want to do is when you get wet, you have to go into the, because the first thing is he pushes her into the ledge pond, which is the orchestra pit, and they splash water all over you and you come up like a drowned rat. So she says you have like 2 seconds to get into yet another black dress and a wig that's not wet. And she said, this is how you do it, And so she's showing me everything. And she's also the one that said, if you button from the bottom up, it's faster and you won't have the little, sometimes when you miss, and you've got it doesn't align properly. She says, that's the reason is because you have to do it from the bottom up. It's faster and you won't have that problem. And, and then you put the granny boots. Do one side back and forth and back and forth and back and forth. Then do the other side back and forth and back and forth and back and forth. The thread, the shoelace. She said, don't do one, then pick up another, do another, then pick up the one and do another. She said, one side, then the other side. And how to tuck in my shoelaces so they won't come out. You just put a little bit of water on, inside the shoe, and the lace gets a little wet. And it won't come out. So it'll stick. Yeah, stuff like that. Use Sobo glue. Just wonderful stuff like that. Like Sobo glue is great for keeping your heel in a shoe if you can't have a strap over your ankle. Just monumental help.
When I spoke to Gwen a lot, Gwen always said it's not about what Charity does on stage, what Charity does behind the scenes and everything else. So, Bob, I did not know very well. I met him a few times, but Gwen, I knew very well. And like I said, I can't believe this hour is almost over. I have 2 more things I have to ask you about. I know, this is crazy. The film All That Jazz is one of my all-time favorites. I mean, I watch it over and over and over. But here is Bob Fosse casting you as his, love interest to his alter ego in this movie. Was that all surreal when you were making All That Jazz?
Well, he changed it just enough because so that I felt, comfortable, more comfortable. Also, he said, this is a classic. He said the setup, he was in his own hospital room before he went to have the operation, and then after the operation. And he said, this is a classic setup. The only thing that's got to change is I have to die. And, he started writing it from his hospital bed right then and there. So by the time it was time to shoot, he had changed just enough so that it could fit a true classical structure that I was very comfortable with it. Yeah. So it was good. It was fine.
Beautiful, beautiful, beautiful film. But I just have to ask you quickly about FX's series, Fosse Verdon. Did you watch it at all? Did you watch some of it?
I watched some of it. I couldn't watch it all. First of all, Sam Rockwell and Michelle Williams are such good actors. I knew that when Bob dies at the end, I couldn't watch it. They're too good, and it would be difficult. People make choices. A certain angle on somebody. It wasn't necessarily the Bob I knew. But their performances were good. I understood the choices that they made to make it more dramatic and just more razor's edge. But it's I didn't want to indulge in it because I have my memory of Bob and Gwen, which is stellar. And I never met 2 people they were so much fun. They were so good. They were good people. They were also good at what they did. And and I couldn't wait to get to work. Most dancers will tell you the same thing when you work with Bob and Gwen. You cannot wait to get to work. You work harder than you've ever worked in your life, and you don't care. It's great. It's so much fun. You have no idea that you're working that hard. And they were probably, I worked with beautiful, beautiful people, and they were right up there with them, just, well, to meet someone who basically you kind of look up to, almost like they're gods and goddesses. And then when you meet them, sometimes that person can disappoint you a bit, but they never disappointed me. Not at all. They were everything that I thought they were when I was watching their work and I was a student. They didn't disappoint me. They were some people you meet, and they're the best of them is the price of the ticket. But with them, no, you got so much more than anything. So I didn't want to see something that was too depressed or too over the top with drug taking and everything else. It's easy to go down that road, so I didn't want to see it. And also because Sam and Michelle are so good, they'll do that really well, and everybody's going to think that's the way Bob and Gwen are. And for me, no, that they weren't that way. They were incredibly positive, which is why they lasted so long. So
Beautifully put.
I was
My
glad
final question.
that I kept my own memories.
Oh, I know. Me too. Totally. So,
Yeah.
You teach young dancers, you choreograph for dance companies, you do a lot of fundraising for them, you do a lot of stuff. But I want to talk just briefly about that beautiful documentary you made called In My Hands, the Marfan Syndrome. I want to talk about the documentary and what that organization means to you, Anne.
Oh, the Marfan Foundation means everything to me. Marfan syndrome is a rare genetic disorder that affects all connective tissue. It's a certain protein we make. They don't make enough of it. So things that are elastic, the way tissue behaves is completely different. And connective tissue means everything you've got. So it's the glue that keeps us together. So it's a pervasive syndrome. My son was blind at one point because the lenses in his eyes dislocated, but they were able to fix that. He had 2 aortic aneurysms, one on the descending, one on the ascending. They fixed that. So 2 major heart operations. Then you literally start to collapse. The integrity of our connective tissue is so good when you realize how remarkable we are when you see somebody who doesn't have that kind of tissue integrity. So he started to collapse on himself. He had severe scoliosis and other like deformities in his ankle. So they had to straighten him out, and they had to go in there twice. So, and then 4 procedures on his right leg. And this is the life of Marfan syndrome, or can be. So I wanted to, and they all usually are very tall and angular, and they look different. And I wanted to do a film about body image for teenagers or young people that are trying to grow up with Marfan syndrome, and being usually the tallest one in the class, being the one that can't do physical education because of your heart, all of this kind of stuff that points the teenager out in the wrong way. So I wanted to choreograph a piece for them that used their elongated torso and trunk and legs and arms. I said to them, if you were a Giacometti or a Modigliani, you'd be worth millions of dollars. And I told them about Bob. I said, Bob literally was crooked. His legs were slightly, bowed and crooked, and he had one shoulder higher than the other, and basically he took his alleged things that held him back, and he choreographed around them. So he got all that turned in stuff, and broken leg, and broken doll, and all of this sort of busted look that became a very incredible style. And I said, so we're going to go the opposite. You're very long. We're going to capitalize on that. And so at the end, they do their own dance. I couldn't work them like dancers because they have heart issues. So I had to keep it very simple. But I wanted them to see how beautiful their bodies were at a time that would really benefit them, and so that they will have more confidence throughout their life.
Well, I'll tell you, it is a beautiful, beautiful documentary. And just so you know, we are out of time. Like I said, I have
dear.
had the most glorious time.
I had a great time with you. Thank you so much.
Listen, everybody, tune in on Thursday night at thepackpodcast.org to listen to Anne Reinking's part of the play BroadwayWorld, and give money to the Actors Fund and the Marfin Foundation. And Anne, I will see you when we are back, bigger than better. We can all hug each other and everybody and everything like that. Everybody, stay safe. Thank you for joining me today.
You too.